Hello, Mystics, and welcome back to my series on books that greatly influenced me. We're going to go through categories again. Let's start with philosophy. This book I read over a decade ago, Human All Too Human by Friedrich Nietzsche. This book is really interesting because it's a book for free spirits. You'll see he writes it right here. And it's really just his musings and his ideas as he's wandering. Nietzsche had a little bit of a nomadic attitude to him. He would just wander, and I've hiked like the Philosopher's Trail in Europe, and it does give you this ability to like reflect in maybe ways that we don't get in America since we are not a walking nation. So a lot of these are just little snippets, and I'm going to share one of them that I highlighted here that I really enjoyed. Human All Too Human, on the History of Moral Sensations, number 45. Misunderstanding Virtue. He who has come to know unvirtue in association with pleasure, such as he who has a dissolute youth behind him, imagines that virtue must be associated with the unpleasurable. He, on the contrary, who is much tormented by his passions and vices, longs for peace and happiness of soul in the practice of virtue. It is thus possible that two virtuous people completely misunderstand each other. And that really hit me when I was younger because I had grown up in the Christian paradigm, and virtue really did seem like something that would cause you not necessarily suffering, but it was dull. And virtue still is dull in some ways, but as Nietzsche says here, when you are tormented by passions and vices, virtue becomes something you strive for, something that you want in your life. I guess Nietzsche is played out now. I've seen a lot of people say that he's overhyped, and I really loved taking my classes in undergrad. So much so, my undergraduate cap with a picture of Nietzsche and a bedazzled mustache, circa 2014 for all of you. Now we'll move into something a little bit more magical. I'm sure you're all very familiar with this book. This is the Lesser Key of Solomon. Most people will call this the demon book because they don't really know a lot about it. So this book was configured and created by these two people down here, Samuel L. McGregor's Mathers, and then Aleister Crowley. Now, this information existed in grimoires, but it hadn't been compiled in a book like this until the 1800s. So when people say that the Lesser Key of Solomon is ancient, not exactly. It's not ancient per se, it's definitely old. I'll do a quick look through. You'll see there's a bunch of sigils and stuff like that describing the different demons, how to capture a spirit, control a demon, all that good stuff. I am a unique practitioner where I believe that it is a balance of light and dark. Now, that being said, these darker infernal spirits are not friendly necessarily. They're not your friends, but they also don't have to be as evil, I think, as Hollywood makes them, or in that way. Like, yes, people have had those experiences and those do exist, but it's not always something to be afraid of. And I'll tell you why. It's actually written here in the book. Aleister Crowley writes in his introduction, which is not in this edition, that the 72 demons represent the 72 sections of the mind. So every demon represents a different aspect of your mind. And that is how magic works on the physical plane. It is through your mind. It's like a computing system. And just as there are 72 demons, there's also 72 angels of the Shemhem Faresh that interact with your mind. It's not a beginner book. It's very interesting. I think a lot of people will pick it up with fear. Remember that your fear is what gives them control and access over you. Until you master those parts of yourself, yeah, this is going to seem really scary. I get that. I know I'm an unusual practitioner when it comes that way in my view of demons. We can talk about that another time in another video. Now for a psychological book that I've really enjoyed. It's called Dancing in the Flames, The Dark Goddess and the Transformation of Consciousness. These two women, Marian Woodman and Eleanor Dixon, were Jungian scholars and psychologists and even philosophers. And this book was really eye-opening because it talks about the dark goddess in a way that is not talked about very well in the West, especially online. People simply equate dark with negative or an evil force, but really the dark goddess is an archetype of transformation, and she's necessary in times of personal and cultural upheaval. The dark goddess, the difference between like God in the Christian view and this version, the dark goddess, Christians view their worldview through transcendence. And you see this in a lot of other religions too. I'm not picking on just Christians. This means transcendence, that the divine exists above or beyond the material world here. And it is what we should be aspiring to. The dark goddess, on the other hand, is a representation of something called immanence. And that is that the divine is within the material world. It's embodied in nature. It's embodied in the physical body itself, in our dreams, sexuality, decay, intuition, the earth. And the dark goddess does a good job representing that because of menstruation, childbirth, aging. This book has so much good, helpful, thoughtful information, especially about the crone. The crone as an archetype is something that Americans in particular are very afraid of because aging. Americans are so afraid of aging. And this book talks about the sacredness of an aging body. In the Western culture, we just consume youth. An older woman is closer to spirit. That's why she's the crone. She's dangerous and she's magical. She's Baba Yaga, for example. And so here in this book, reclaiming that crone energy, it doesn't mean that there's no eroticism either. And this is very like taboo to the West. We see sexuality as a performance and a form of seduction. In this book, these women express that it's not eroticism for seduction. It's eroticism through mystery, through the dedication and devotion to truth, through presence and touch. It's rooted in wisdom and not performance. Mind-blowing book. Cannot recommend enough. I can't believe I bought this for $6. I love my book hunting. Another psychological book I really enjoyed is Ego and Archetype by Edward F. Edinger. Sorry if I said that wrong. This book is also based in Jungian psychology, and it goes through the symbolism of different religions. It is because of the symbolism in religion that allows for the integration of the whole self. It is very Christian heavy, but this is one of the books that really helped me get through some of my religious trauma. And I have a second book to add to that, which would be Understanding Your Bible, A Philosopher's Puzzle by Manly P. Hall, also helped me get through a lot of my religious trauma. This was a really interesting picture that I enjoyed. So the blood of Christ, this is a spider map that shows all of the correlations and correspondences to the blood and the meaning of blood in this religion. Catholicism is really hardcore. Like a lot of in this book, looking at the Christ figure as an archetype, not just as a historical figure or a biblical figure. We see Dionysus in relation to Christ, Vishnu in relation to Christ, Osiris in relation to Christ. And it really helped me understand syncretism, and not from a cultural appropriation perspective, although maybe some of that happened, but the sharing of ideas among other cultures, creating a myth of how to alchemize your soul, go from lead to gold. Because ultimately, what that is in a psychological sense is you integrating the entirety of your personality. It was really hard for me to read this book because I had to relive some of the teachings of Jesus that I realized while reading that weren't his teachings at all. That the modern church has included a lot of their own teachings for moral and political control that Jesus never said. And that's a huge part of this book too, is about like the ethical teaching of religion. I have so many emotions about this. I think the way that religion has been run has completely forgotten the human individual experience with God because they're more focused on politics and money, where church has been used as a political control mechanism rather than the deep esoteric experience that it should be. And the last book we're going to talk about today is one I talk about all the time. I talk about this book so much because it's one of my favorites. The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. I talk about this book almost in every interview because it's a great encyclopedia for people who are interested in diving into the world of esotericism, specifically Western esotericism. So I'm going to read for you the entire title of this book because it is insane. The Secret Teaching of All Ages, an encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy. This book is a tiny edition of a much larger one that I have up here with a lot of large pictures that I love by Augustus Knopf and their paintings. I have some of them hung around my house as well. So I'm going to go through some of the chapters in this book, just the titles, that were very inspiring to me when I was first starting my journey. Chapter 4, The Ancient Mysteries and Secret Societies. Part 3, The Eleusinian Mysteries, the Dionysic Mysteries, the Orphic Mysteries, the Lesser and Greater Rites. Chapter 5, Atlantis and the Gods of Antiquity. Understanding Plato's Atlantis in the light of modern science, the myth of a dying god, the rite of Tammuz and Ishtar, the mysteries of Attis and Adonis, the rites of Sabius. Sorry, I've never really said some of these names out loud because I just read them. And I don't know if you've ever had that experience when you read something and you mispronounce it and then it's really embarrassing when you say it out loud. Chapter 6, The Life and Writings of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus. Chapter 10, The Zodiac and its Signs. Chapter 9, The Table of Isis. Plato's initiation in the Great Pyramid. Amazing. That was so inspiring to understand that Plato was initiated. I've talked about that in other videos, but mind-blowing. I loved it so much. I have a thing about numbers. I am dyslexic and I also have dyscalculia, so numbers are hard for me sometimes, but reading chapters 13 and 14 about Pythagoras and his mathematics and understanding that it was a bigger perspective of the world rather than just counting, that numbers were actually alive to him. Amazing. Completely opened up a new understanding of math for me. Chapter 22 includes Pacts with Demons, which of course I had to know all about. Chapter 29, The Analysis of Tarot Cards. It just goes on and on. There's a total of 56 chapters. And you will have so much to pull from this book. It's almost 1,000 pages, but for this to even exist is such a blessing. Manly P. Hall wrote this when he was 27 years old. That's insane. This man just went to the library in New York, pulled out all the old stuff, and rewrote it in a new way. Some people tell me they have a hard time following Manly's writing. I personally don't. I find it very easy. I will say his lecture notes are a little bit tedious to read, but this book and then other pamphlets like this one, this is the psychology of religious ritual. Amazing. It explains why ritual works, what it does, how it interacts with the mind. I find this to be very easily readable. Oh my God, I have a postcard in here. How cool. Hi, Venus. So I also highlighted all that good stuff. At physical death, the body is separated violently from the soul. But by initiation into the mysteries, the soul is separated gently and lovingly from the body. Separation does not mean the death of the body, but makes possible to the enlightened a way of life superior to the body. Only when the soul is restored to its own place does man obtain his real humanity. Man is not a body, but a soul shining through a body, and the psychic self is restored by the disciplines of wisdom as bestowed by the religio-philosophic institutions, which I think have failed us in 2025. Thank you for joining me, and stay tuned for more in this series because we've got a lot of other books to go through. Until next time, mystics, stay magical.